I am now.
I
yeah.
would say, can't prove it, but my feeling, my intuition is that long psych meds probably do affect some of the warning, like the behaviors that would go along with a typical warning sign. I would say yes.
Probably just
That you might see less of, I mean, you're not going to see huge ups and downs.
Right.
You know, you're going to be seeing this.
Right.
Because that's kind of what meds do, especially if they've been on them for a long time and they up them because you kind of develop a tolerance. But this is not, I can't prove this. Maybe I could if I looked into it, but I've never looked into it. But definitely, you know, I'm just looking at the warning signs: depression, crying, insomnia, inability to think or function, excessive sleep, appetite loss. Sudden happiness, you know, that's probably not going to happen if someone is on meds. Yeah, I would say there's probably
So
would affect some of these warning signs.
What you're saying is that it would mask.
I think so.
It
I
could
think they would.
mask and be even more dangerous.
I don't
To be
know.
on
It's
for some people.
for some people. It's hard for me to be up here because I can't, you know, I have to be careful about how I talk about medications because, it's just a very touchy subject. But I think yes, it could mask some things. Nobody get off medications here, please. And if you do, I mean, maybe that's the answer. Really, pray about it and bring someone into your process. Don't do it alone. Okay.
I have a friend that has a grandson who is on medication, and he goes to counseling as well. And one time, he questioned the counselor about God. And so the counselor talked, and he told the grandmother, he said, when you put God into the mix, sometimes you can get off of some of the medications.
Yeah.
So there is a spiritual, there's something there.
Yes, there is. Yes, I believe that. I believe that very much. Yeah, any other? Decline in performance of work, school, or other activities, deteriorating physical appearance or reckless actions. So what to do? Do you guys feel like, let me look here. Do you guys feel like you kind of are getting a grasp of maybe what some warning signs? Do you think I missed any? Do you have any of your own experiences that you would like to share?
Gender identity concerns.
Oh, okay. So, absolutely. There are categories of people that are greater at risk, veterans. And thank you for bringing that up, because this is very important. In Montana, we have a lot of veterans, and veterans really, really, Lord Jesus, help us. I mean, they are dying at far greater rates than they need to be. Montana's helpline, I think if you dial 1, if you're a veteran and you dial 1, it'll get you sort of specific veteran services. Also, Native Americans, they are at a greater risk in Montana. And people, like you're speaking, people that have gender identity or sexual identity, that issues or however you want to say it. I don't care what anyone's belief system is about this, but the truth is that these kids are dying far greater rates than the rest of the population. I have probably a statistic in here about that, if you would like, but you can trust me on this, especially in homes where there's strong beliefs about that kind of thing. And so if you know anyone that is struggling, let me find it.
And I just point out that we can hear you good without the microphone, and you use 2 hands. Lord, if you wanted to.
Talk loud.
There you go.
4 times more likely.
Wow.
Suicide in LGBTQ, 4 times more likely to die by suicide, and 3 times more likely to attempt suicide.
You know, I'm not sure if it's in the signs to watch for section, but a couple things that I would think would fit is people who have had others die by suicide.
Yes.
It increases their risk just crazy, maybe 5 times.
Yeah.
And the other thing is people that have had losses.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you qualify 50 years of living with someone and having them gone, and especially compounded losses of children, or even like, you know, they'll be sailing along and then just something tips them over, maybe even a dog dying or a child going to college. But losses, if we could just be aware kindly in a community of people that have sustained an amazing amount of loss, that they are at high risk.
That's right. Yep, just be aware of that. I mean, it's this community resilience model, you know, and I really like this venue. And I don't know if everyone probably isn't maybe connected to this church, but everyone is connected to this community. And we have what it takes in our communities. We do. We don't. I called the suicide, she runs the national, or the Montana helpline. She runs all this. She's a very fancy lady. And I called her during the string of suicides in Livingston. And I said, can you help? And had this conversation with her. And the last thing I asked her was, what's one piece of information that you would give people? One piece. And what she said is, everyone needs to know they have the capacity to help. When people are calling the suicide number, they know there's not a psychiatrist. They just want to be heard. The people on the other end of the number, they're not fancy people. They're not psychologists or psychiatrists or me's. I'm not that fancy. But, you know, I have the letters. They don't have the, I mean, people just want to be heard sometimes. They just want to know they're heard and they matter and they're real. And we all can do that. We all can do that for someone.
So then does that put our children who are constantly on their phones, not talking to each other,
Yes.
more at risk?
The suicide, so it's so interesting because right now there's less teen pregnancy. Can you believe this? There's less drug and alcohol use, risky behaviors, but there's more depression and suicide.
Wow.
With our young people. Yeah.
They feel isolated, don't
So
they?
I'd rather have pregnancy, sorry. Did I say that? But yeah, they're isolated, and that's why, because they're by themselves, they feel alone, and then there's the whole social media thing where they,
Yeah.
this world that's created
Bullying.
around them that they think they're not a part of, and it's not real. So, yeah.
You mentioned the 3 suicides in Lewistown. Was it a suicide pact?
Okay, that's a good point. This was in Livingston, but it wasn't a pact, but there is a cluster effect that happens. So I do have a thing here about media. I don't know if anyone here, if y'all are media professionals or part of the paper or whatever, grab this from me, or you can pass it to them. But there's a certain way, like when like a famous person dies, there is a cluster effect. It really is real. And some of that can be mitigated by how it, I don't think that's in the packet, so if you, I have a few extra.
Is that in my thing?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in Doreen's. So there are increased suicides after like a famous person dies, and some of it has to do with how the media treats it and the language they use surrounding it. A lot of times with young people, we sort of put them in we kind of idolize them a little bit, or you know, their school does, and and if someone's really struggling, they think that might be kind of their route to, I don't know, I guess I won't get into that, but so it wasn't a pact, but it was a cluster that was all connected, and they all died, I think, not by guns, interesting, they died by hanging, and so that is what makes me think somehow they were connected. Word got out that that's how one person did it. They were in the same age group, but they were not part of the same team or whatever, like same peer group. But it can happen especially with younger people, it really can. So be watching. It kind of touches into what my mom said is the loss of someone. A person who has experienced a suicide, someone that died by suicide in their family, they're at a greater risk, for sure. So reach out to those people. Is that all? I'm glad you guys are asking questions. I did my thesis.
About, we're just talking about communities and the pain of my friend who died in Harleton last year by suicide, that she was probably clinically bipolar. Very few people saw the downside, and she was seen as a vibrant. It would be as if I would have died by suicide in Harleton, Montana. People, know me, pretty cheerful, functional, friendly, and though that is really hard on a community. And just because of Emerald and really God's grace, it's not that we were in, you just try to do with loving hearts. That's really dangerous for a community because they look at her like if they're struggling and they're not functioning at even the level that she was, and they're barely hanging on, financial issues, working for minimum wage, and it's like, why should I even try? Leah couldn't make it, and so we just immediately, and honestly, sometimes you fight the professionals. I don't know where you guys' area in the community is, but I'm a nurse, but I'm kind of a love person. And the medical community fought us in Harleton and said, you can't say, these old stereotypes. And it's like, you know what, you have to err on the side of love. And, we basically got the family's permission to say Leah sadly died of suicide. First of all, just saying that instead of just saying that she passed away or she died in her sleep or that she died by suicide, and we care, and we just called the troops. We called, public meetings, we offered, the workplaces, we just offered to show up, and it proved to be so true that there were dozens of people in our community, and some of them men that I had no idea that struggled with depression, that were totally rattled to the core, saying, I don't know where to go with my sad feelings. And this just about, put me under. I was thinking about how to end it because so it just validated that, I hope humbly we can do that again, but that just think about those issues if you guys have suffered or in the future suffer suicide. And it doesn't just have to be that person that is by surprise. Any suicide is an opportunity to look at the hurting and the survivors. And you don't have to be a professional. You have to just be brave to ask the questions and be available.
And it's hard. Like if you notice how I'm saying die by, like some of the language that I'm using is probably, like I haven't said commit suicide. I don't know if you noticed that. But because there is, it's like committing a crime. It's just these, and that makes it hard for people that are struggling with suicidal thinking to talk about it. Because of just what we have done with our language and surrounding suicide. That's why I said go and say it in the mirror 20 times. That's your homework. Just get comfortable with it. I researched and I talk about it all the time, and I still struggle saying it. That's the truth.
Well, we were taught that suicide was wrong.
Yes.
You do not take a life.
Yes.
But sometimes people are so depressed,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine what puts them that low. And so let's say we have a friend that does commit suicide, what do we do with the rest of the family? How do we talk to them?
Okay.
Isn't that this afternoon?
Yeah.
Oh, that's this afternoon.
Yeah, I have
Save
a
it.
section on that, and I want to talk about what do you do? How do you bring this up? We have the warning signs. Remember, sometimes there's no warning signs. Always remember that. It's important to remember that. But so say all the warning signs are there. What now? And I would like to say, because that made me think, when someone is at that place, this is kind of research coming from people that have been at that place, which I think is the best research, but you gotta understand, it's hard to research suicide because there's often not, the person is dead, you know, so, but what they have done some research on really serious attempts, like people that have jumped off bridges and that kind of thing, and they're not looking at it like, I'm gonna do A, B, or C. They're option A, B, or C, that they're looking at that is the option. There's nothing else there's no way out, no other options. And people talk about a feeling of powerlessness and burdensomeness. That's a big word. Burdensomeness. And I swear that is
That's a thing.
But in that part, when I learned about that really hit me. So often people, they think everyone else would be better off with like their children. You know, these are the thoughts we have is like, did I love them enough and did they love me
Right.
enough? Well, sometimes they think they're doing it out of a place of love. They're like, I don't want to, especially with the 60 and over, you know, we're talking about that age cohort again. I don't want to be a problem to my family. You know, so hopelessness, lost all hope, not able to see anything, and burdensomeness. Those are two concepts that go on in the research about people that have had serious attempts. Anyways, there was something else that you said that made me think. I'm sure I'll get there.
So how does one handle when your child comes up to you and says, I'm so stupid, I should not be here?
I don't know, the child. I would take it seriously. What do you mean? So let me go. Well, I mean, I'm saying that's what I would say to them. What do you mean by that? So let me cover what to do, and then if you still are having that, then please we can talk after or whatever, okay? So this might cover it, it might not. Like, remember when I talked about the balloon being blown up, and then when you say it, so don't ever be afraid to say it. The worst thing to say is nothing at all. And it's best to be really direct. So the paper, if you would like, should I make you do this? I don't know. It would be helpful. Maybe come up with a saying that you feel the most comfortable saying, and I can throw a few out here to you. Are you suicidal? That works, but it's weird. Like, I kind of want to put you guys in groups and have you practice with each other, because it's so weird. I'm a professional counselor, and it's still hard for me. Have you thoughts of killing yourself?